Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is the Jim Masters Show, live entertainment, lifestyle, celebrity talk show series. And you saw on your screen our very special guest who's coming up right now, the incomparable, celebrated Hollywood author extraordinaire, Laurie Jacobson is here. And you see the Beatles on the screen there, right? Well, there's a reason why. We're going to be talking about them and celebrating them, of course. We would need hours and hours and hours and hours to do that. But in this time we're going to share this wonderful new book that she has penned. It's been out a couple years. However, everybody still loves this book. Top of the Mountain, The Beatles at Shea Stadium, 1965. Now, for anybody who grew up in the New York area, Shea Stadium, of course, we went, still go. Now it's Citi Field. They tore it down and now it's Citi Field. But we saw many a concert, many a Met game, and so much more at the iconic Shea Stadium. And there was that night in 1965, that period in 1965, when the Beatles came to town. And boy, the world changed after that, huh? Well, our very accomplished guest who has written about so many extraordinary topics has focused on that period, one of the greatest periods in music for the Beatles in terms of kicking things off, the notoriety, and so much more. And one of the greatest of their concerts. It was an epic. Of course, I wasn't there, but you just have an opportunity to really learn about it by reading this book. Whether you're a Beatles fan, you're a music lover, maybe a Shea Stadium lover, whatever the case may be, it's really incredible. And I want to tell you a little bit about it as we do welcome Laurie to the show. She herself she loves entertainment. She's an award-winning Hollywood author, but also a reformed stand-up comic. She worked out in Harvey Lembeck's comedy improv workshop for years with her classmates. Now get this, her classmates were Robin Williams. Yeah, that's just one of them. Robin Williams, she had an opportunity to enjoy some classroom time with, and also John Larroquette. Yeah, and what a great group, huh? And John Ritter, of course, the iconic actor who we lost way too soon, who starred on Three's Company, and so much more. Laurie immersed herself in the history of those who came before her as well. And the stories she uncovers have become the basis for a lot of her books. Her archetype book, Hollywood Heartbreak, was the 75-year history of Hollywood, told through the lives and deaths of 31 people. We're going to have her back. We're going to focus on that one because following its publication, Laurie emerged as a leading Hollywood historian, not just an author and somebody with comedic timing and this comedy background, but as a fantastic historian, an appreciation lover of all of these kinds of stories that she shares and she tells, which I think is fantastic. Since then, she has written and produced documentaries, television series, specials, including a very, very special one, the 20th anniversary of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, one of the iconic and most beloved series of all time, one of my favorites. The Museum of Television and Radio's salute to funny women in television. Also, the Warner Brothers Studio rededication, the Suzanne Summers Show, yeah, and Photo Play and Hollywood Chronicles. And for 9 years, she served as head of development for the legendary producer Jack Haley Jr. And her fourth book, and we're going to talk about this down the line, she happens to be also the loving wife of John Provost, Timmy, Lassie. He was with us when we did the Desilu Kids, and we had Tina Cole on and Stanley Livingston, and it was just really fantastic. And he's going to be at that too in September. But he's going to be back with us also in about a week. We're really going to focus on his iconic career. They are husband and wife. And they have a wonderful, wonderful relationship. And she wrote this book. It is Timmy's in the Well. It's the John Provost story, an outstanding memoir she co-wrote with him. And we'll talk about that on a later episode, a little tease there for you. And so many others. TV dinners, 40 classic TV kids stars dish up favorite recipes with a side of memories. We've got lots of great episodes coming up. But this book, Top of the Mountain, The Beatles at Shea Stadium in 1965, captures the compelling story behind the biggest entertainment event really the world has ever seen. Dozens of interviews and hundreds of never before seen photos add to this fascinating, surprising, untold Beatle story. It's going to be something really, really special. And she's appeared on lots of great shows too, our very special guest, Laurie Jacobson, radio, television. She's been on Morning Joe, Breakfast with the Beatles, CNN, Art Bell, A&E, History Channel, and so much more. And guess what? She's debuting. This is her debut right here on the Jim Masters Show live series. So again, it is my pleasure to welcome her. We've got some iconic photos and great stories to share. And we'll ask her why it is she wanted to focus on this very special night, the Beatles, when they were at Shea Stadium in 1965, because on that sweltering Sunday evening in August of 65, 56,000 people traveled by plane, car, bus, ferry, and subway to pack New York Shea Stadium. And they were there not for a ball game, but the rock and roll concert, the audacious dream of promoter Sid Bernstein. And no band had ever played a baseball stadium, so that was new. And a few believed it could be pulled off, but on that glorious night, the Beatles sold out Shea Stadium, shattering all existing box office and attendance records in show business history. And it really was an iconic night, an iconic time. And against that backdrop of mounting political and cultural tumult, Top of the Mountain delivers the details and excitement of Shea and the spirited, curious new generation who would soon claim the decade of its own. Again, packed with hundreds of color photographs, it gives a one-of-a-kind account of the monumental event, gathering first-person interviews, quotes from dozens, and so much more. It really was a very special night. And these guys made it happen, the Beatles. Here is a cover of the book again. It's available at Amazon and where books are sold. And it is my pleasure to welcome for the first time and not the last, coming to us from Northern California, beautiful Northern California. Been there many times. Laurie Jacobson is joining us on the Jim Masters Show. Welcome to the show, Laurie. A pleasure to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Jim. I hope I can live up to your fantastic introduction.
The pleasure is all mine. You know, before we talk about the Beatles and the book and everything, I love, and we'll have you back again. We've been already talking about having you back for other books and more. I love the comedy part of you as well. You do have a quick wit and that great comedic timing. Comedy was a real interest of yours early on in your career and your life, huh?
Yes. Yes, I was in, as you mentioned, Harvey Lembeck's comedy workshop. And Harvey was a New Yorker and was friends with Gary Marshall and Phil Foster and Buddy Hackett and that whole group from New York. And everyone said to Harvey, you can't teach comedy, but guess what? You could. And the people who wanted to make it in comedy flocked to his class. So as you mentioned, Robin was there before anybody knew his name. And I would write letters back to my hometown of St. Louis saying, watch for this guy, Robin Williams, like I was some incredible talent scout. But when, us classmates we knew the minute we saw him take the stage, there was nobody like him in this world. And Ritter, the two of them together were insane. Then Gary Marshall discovered Harvey's class and all these wonderful people and started sending Scotty Baio and different people from his multitudes of television shows to sharpen their comedic tools in Harvey's class. So I was there for 7 years. It was really a workshop, and It was an unforgettable experience. And we're also bonded, all of us. You know, it was like therapy. Things would just, in improv, things pop out, and, you know, your deepest, darkest secrets, and you're
Yeah,
laughing about them. And it has a way of bonding you forever with those people.
it sure does. Absolutely. It's a great beginning, too, to have that because you got to laugh, right? I always say that there's a couple of things that are natural healers and natural elixirs, and they're also universal languages and they bring people together: music and laughter,
There
right?
you go. There you
It's so,
go. The two
it's
big
so true.
things. Yes.
Yeah. Last night we had an extraordinary episode celebrating Peter Marshall, the iconic television game actor, singer, extraordinary Broadway star, everything. And I know you probably want to maybe share your thoughts about Peter a little bit too, as we're still talking about him. You had some wonderful things you were mentioning off the air.
Oh, what I said to you off the air was, as I read all the beautiful tributes to him, I thought this guy had the greatest job in show business. He knew everybody, everybody knew him, and to sit in on one day of work when he probably shot 5 shows in a row, and all he did was laugh at the funniest people in the world who appeared in the squares. And I think that's why he lived so long, because he laughed so much. It had to be the best job in TV.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say, or maybe hosting The Price is Right too, but that's a lot of running around. You have to know all those games, and that's it's moving quick at The Price is Right. God bless him. And so you've written, and we were just sort of teasing the audience a little bit about some of the different kinds of books that you've written. What turns you on? What inspires you? Because you have such a wonderful variety of material, and it isn't all just one category. There's so many wonderful aspects of life that you've sunk your teeth into and have been able to share these stories on. What inspires you to come up with or to focus on a subject matter and to bring it to life, either take us back in time and have us relive it or introduce it to new folks for the first time, or just celebrate things that have happened in our lives? What inspires you?
Well, I have to say that growing up in St. Louis, as I said, there were 2 shows, The Late Show and The Late Late Show. And so I grew up watching Cagney and Gable and Harlow and Tracy and Hepburn and that whole crowd. And so when I finally, and I loved them, and just I loved everything about the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. When I got to LA in the mid 70s, I really thought I had missed it all. But I'd go to Schwab's drugstore, and a career waitress would come to my table. She'd been there 30 years. And she would say, "You know, you're sitting in Clark Gable's favorite booth."
Mm,
How do you know that?
what's
Well, he came in here every Wednesday, and he always sat there, and I waited on him. And I would get these amazing stories. And I found that Mater D's knew everybody and knew everything. They held their jobs for so long because they knew who was dating whom, who had broken up with whom.
hmm
He knew where to seat people. These two have to be on the other side of the room from each other. These two can sit together. All of these things that they had to know, and no one ever spoke to them. The pops, guards at the gates of the studios, who often, let's say at Warner Brothers, Jack Warner never fired anybody himself. He left it up to these poor guards to bar the Bowery boys from the studio. "Sorry, my orders are not to let you in. Your career is over." What horrible news to have to deliver. And the things he saw at the gate. And no one talked to these people. So when I got there, I talked to these people, and they had incredible stories. And I quickly learned that the studios had a veil of publicity behind which the real lives and the real names of these celebrities were often hidden. The screen's first vamp was a woman named Theda Bara, and she was mysterious and Egyptian and exotic. And she was really Theodosia Goodman from Minneapolis, Minnesota, a nice Jewish girl. So, when you find out the truth, it's, it was so much fun. So there were so
kind of like Joan Crawford, right? Yeah. Wasn't she Lucille Lusser from Texas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lucille Lusser, who was discovered Charlestoning on tabletops at clubs in Hollywood. And, who knew she was not such a great mom, but if she was your friend, she was loyal to you to the end. There was a silent screen actress named Marie Prevost, no relation to my husband, John Prevost.
Timmy.
She couldn't make it in talkies. She was a well-known entity in silent films, and she had a Brooklyn honk, and she put on weight by the time talkies came around, and she just didn't make it. She started drinking very heavily and was found dead in her apartment, surrounded by empty liquor bottles and a very hungry little dog. And an IOU to Joan Crawford, who was keeping her going by loaning her money because they had once worked together in an early talkie. So she was a dear friend to many, just not to her kids. But when I learned to pull back that veil and see what really went on and the payoffs, if there was an unsolved murder in Hollywood, somebody paid a lot of money to keep it that way. And the district attorney in Los Angeles in the 30s ended up committing suicide with a gun that supposedly was involved with the William Desmond Taylor murder in the very early 20s, which actually led to the formation of Beverly Hills, because there were 3 huge scandals in the early 20s, and the tabloids were born because of these scandals, and the celebrities needed to take cover. And so Doug Fairbanks and Mary Pickford, the king and queen of Hollywood, lived in Beverly Hills, which was not more beautiful than any other part of Los Angeles, but it wasn't part of LA. And the police department was their private police department, and they had their own mayor. And so the stars scurried across the strip away from Los Angeles and settled in Beverly Hills, where if you were stopped for driving inebriated in the evening, more than likely the Beverly Hills police would escort you home. And you might tip them or give them a ticket to your next premiere, and everything was hunky-dory and secrets were kept. And I wanted to know those secrets. So that's my long story of what inspired me in the beginning to find out what really went on in this town.
You're like an investigative journalist of sorts, huh?
It was a lot of fun. Oh, and it was so thrilling to really get to the bottom of things.
So terms of getting to the bottom of things and celebrating, what was it about the Beatles and that story and that particular big time when they were at the Shea Stadium that particular night and everything that came, forward and was resulting from it, which was really iconic. And then you wrote this book, of course, celebrating that, the Beatles at Shea Stadium, 1965, Top of the Mountain. What was the inspiration for it? What was it about the Beatles, that particular concert, that time, that interested you enough to want to write a book about it?
Oh, gosh. Luckily, we have a lot of time because there was so much that inspired me to write about this particular concert. First of all, as you said, nobody had ever played a baseball stadium before. Nobody believed it could be done. Even the Beatles manager, Brian Epstein, wasn't sure. And the promoter of the concert, a gentleman named Sid Bernstein, told Brian, I will pay you $10 for every empty seat in the stadium. That's how sure Sid was that it would be a sellout. And at the time, tickets were like $4, $5, and $6. So $10 for every empty seat was a good offer, and Brian couldn't turn it down. He asked for a $100,000 guarantee, and Sid said no problem. But Brian said, here's the catch. I want half of it in 3 months, and you cannot publicize the concert until I get $50,000. And Sid said, how am I going to get $50,000 if I can't publicize the concert? And Brian said, well, I didn't say you couldn't talk about it. So now here's my favorite part of the story where this could never happen today with the internet. Sid's wife, they had just had a baby. She was pulling her hair out. What have you done to us? You promised him $10 for every empty seat. You promised him $50,000 in 3 months. What are we going to do? She's packing her bag to go home to mama. He's beside himself with depression. He takes his newborn son and they're walking in Washington Square Park. And he was known for booking a lot of talent along the lines of Judy Garland, Tony Bennett, that genre of entertainment. But the teens knew him and they came running up to him. Mr. Bernstein, what are you doing next? And he looked at them and said, well, I'm bringing the Beatles to Shea Stadium in 8 months. One girl fainted. The rest started screaming. How do we get tickets? What do we do? So he ran to the nearest post office branch, got a box, came back, told the kids who were still waiting what the ticket prices were and where to send their money. And he waited 3 weeks before he had the courage to go to the post office box and see if anything was there. And when he said, I'm here to look at box such and such, they all came out from behind the counter to see who this guy was who had this box. And out they come with bags and bags and bags full of letters. And these bags had yen, he had rubles, he had money from behind the Iron Curtain. And these teenage girls, before the internet, when there's only long distance and mail, they had spread the word around the world. And the stadium was sold out. And then he had to return thousands of letters and money.
Wow.
So I loved that story because I loved the power of the teenage girl. And then there were the 8 months of planning to make this happen and bringing it all together. And I have a timeline running along in the margin of of the book of what was going on in the world during those 8 months. The Beatles were touring Europe. They did play some in the States and discovered that they were playing to segregated audiences, which they refused to do. And the civil rights movement is moving along in 64 and early 65. So it really reflects what was going on in the world. By showing what was going on in the Beatles' career. When they get to Shea Stadium, they're scared. They had never played before 56,000 people, and they were a little bit afraid to go on. But
the New York Mets would love 56,000 people at the game.
Yeah. Oh, and the people that were there, a teenage Meryl Streep,
that's right.
a 9-year-old Whoopi Goldberg, a 14-year-old Steve Van Zandt, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were there. Bobby Vinton was there. Bobby was there with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. They were all being represented by the same person. And Bobby told me that some kids from Brooklyn attacked Mick Jagger. You think you're so tough. Boom. And Mick is running for his life, trying to get down into the stadium to find the Beatles. And Bobby said, I'm running behind him. And then he thought, what am I running for? They're not chasing me. So
when he was running, was he saying, I can't get no satisfaction?
Well, he actually approached Sid and said, do you think we'd ever be able to play a baseball stadium? And Sid said, give it a couple of years, Mick, and I think you'll get there.
You'll be able to get there. Wow.
So, and you mentioned unseen photographs.
Yes.
I was floored to find photos of the Beatles that nobody had ever seen. Carly Simon's younger brother was there. He took a bunch of photos that nobody had ever seen. And he took a lot of photos of the crowd, which were terrific. I talked to at least one person from all of the opening acts that evening. And one lovely lady said, well, my dad came with me that night and he took 80 color slides. We watched them after the concert and then we put them in a drawer and no one's ever seen them. Would you like to have them? So, yeah, that would be
golden.
marvelous. The picture on the cover was taken by a guy named Mark Weinstein. I dedicated the book to him because he passed away before it came out. He was 16 or 17, I believe, and he was determined to get on the field and take photos of the Beatles. He had a really nice camera. He wore his lucky bar mitzvah suit. And as you may know, you're bar mitzvahed when you're 13. So a 17-year-old in a 4-year-old suit looked pretty funny. And he, instead of going to his seat, he went down. He found a door that he could go down into the bowels of Shea Stadium, and it was all hallways with doors. So he starts turning doorknobs, trying to find a door that's open. They're all locked. He's going down the hall, and one of them opens, and he walks inside, and it's filled with New York City cops. And he thought, well, if I shut the door and run, they're going to run after me. So he was such a quick thinker. He adopted a British accent. He walked in, said that he was a friend of George Harrison's and he was there to take photos and he had gotten separated from his group. Could you help me out onto the stage? And, we didn't really know that much about British people at that time. We learned a lot because of the Beatles, and they took one look at him in this tight suit where the pants were too short and they thought, oh yeah, he's British. So they actually walked him right out onto the field. He stood next to Brian Epstein, and nobody said, hey kid, what are you doing here? And he took 65 photos. There's Brian in the corner of that photo in one of Mark's photos.
And these are Adam Kushner photos and photographed by Mark Weinstein, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We thank
so so he gave me all of his photos, all 65 of them. So and there were several other people like that. Another gentleman walked into the bowels of the stadium, and the door that opened for him was the Beatles' dressing room.
Wow.
And he also thought, well, if I shut the door, they're gonna know I'm not supposed to be here. So he just walked in. There were only like 5 or 6 people in there with the Beatles. And you know what people ask for at concerts now, the things they want to have in the dressing room. The Beatles asked for 8 Coca-Colas, 4 pots, and Ringo wanted a black and white TV because he loved American television. That's all they wanted.
That's what they wanted to say and do, huh? Wow.
Yeah, because, they could never leave the hotel.
No. Mm-mm.
The hotel was surrounded by thousands of girls.
Look at how crowded. Yeah, look at all the way up to the nosebleed seats, as they call them, completely. Shea Stadium, 1965.
The Beatles in this photo are pointing to some runners, some kids who tried to make it across the field before they were stopped.
Oh, yes, right.
By the police. And Sid Bernstein also brought karate and judo to America. And so he had 200 martial arts people also protecting the Beatles from fans because, the mayor said, we can't do this. If 10,000 people decide to storm the stage, there's nothing we can do. But they didn't. They were just happy to breathe the same air that the Beatles were breathing. So by the last song, no one could hear them over the screaming. No one could see them. There were no diamond screens or anything. And when John realized that it was all for nothing, that they were there to be seen but not heard, he started playing the organ with his elbow, started singing crazy lyrics, and that photo there is he and George just completely cracked up. And that was the last song, and Mark climbed on a chair that was next to the stage to get that last shot.
Wow, that's incredible. All of the shots are incredible, huh?
The stories of the people who ended up in the audience. 2 future Beatle wives were there. Linda Eastman and Barbara Bach escorted her little sister, who was the Beatle fan, not Barbara. Just the stories, the stories of who ended up there.
And it's amazing because in the book itself, this must have taken some time. It's packed with the photographs, but as I mentioned, it gives this one of a kind account of that monumental event because you gathered first person interviews and quotes from dozens of those who experienced this piece of pop culture history. You got, word from celebrities, writers, agents, producers, photographers, opening act performers, like you had mentioned, security guards, radio personalities, camera people, fans, which is extraordinary. And That's incredible. Keith Richards, Mick Jagger, Felix Cavaliere, and the Rascals. He was a guest on our show not that long ago. He's a sweetheart of a guy.
He
Marvin Gaye.
is.
This is when you started this. When did you start this project? Because this was probably quite intense to gather all this. And how long did it take to write the book?
Well, I spent close to 7 years gathering all the information, which was the most fun part. And then the writing down of it. It was really complicated because I had so many things going on, and I had so many side stories that were fabulously interesting, but had really nothing to do with Shea. And I'll tell you two of them. There was well, one day I'm sitting at my desk and my phone rings and I pick it up and it's John Sebastian calling me. So I then had an out of body experience. I had just written him on Facebook. Whoever thought he would read it, but he did. And he called me. I heard he was at Shea, but he was at Shea in 66, not 65. But he was still bowled over by Beatlemania. And he had met the Beatles in London and gave me this fabulous story about being at a press conference where John was started a food fight, and John Lennon started the food fight. Sebastian thought he was kind of an idiot that night. And George came to him and said, "You want to get out of here? My friend Brian Jones of the Stones just got a sitar." And Sebastian said, "Yeah." So they go to Brian Jones's house. They smoke this unbelievable hash. And Sebastian is telling me this story. He said, we smoked temple balls of hash, the kind that make the whole temple levitate. And we played sitars until the sun came up in the morning. And I thought, well, I've got to put this in the book. So I ended up with a lot of special boxes within chapters as the details of Shea advance. There were these special stories that I heard. And another one that I loved was about this British woman named Alma Cogan. And I kind of compare her to Connie Francis in America. She was a little bit corny. And when but she was the highest paid female entertainer in England. She was very, very popular. And John Lennon used to make fun of her when he was in art school. But then they did a show with her. And after the show, she invited everybody back to her house where her sister and her mother were. And she held these salons. And other entertainers who were just a little bit older. Alma was 7 years older than John. So she had a very interesting array of showbiz people that the Beatles certainly knew. And they told the most wonderful anecdotes, and they played charades, which the Beatles had never heard of. And Paul later said, we learned how to be guests at Alma's house. And John adored her. And she was Jewish. They didn't know a lot of Jewish people. It was a whole culture they hadn't really been exposed to. And I'm thinking, okay, she's 7 years older. She's introducing him to a new kind of life and a new kind of culture. And this sounds just like Yoko, who's 7 years older, and introduced him to a new kind of culture. And, he definitely had an affair with Alma. And Cynthia, I have quotes of Cynthia talking about it. And
of course, he had that relationship with May Pang too.
Yes.
And
Well, that was,
she was a guest on our show. That was later, but she was a guest on our show, and really amazing stories that she shared about that, where she even said Yoko pretty much endorsed that
yes,
relationship.
she
Yeah.
sanctioned that relationship.
Yeah.
But, so here I see this pattern of older women, John being attracted to older women from a different culture. And the most extraordinary thing for me personally in writing the book was how even back in 65, when they had not yet even reached the pinnacle of their career, I could already see the signs of their breakup. As that year progressed toward Shea, they shot the movie Help before they got there. George heard a sitar for the first time by a small group of musicians who were playing in the background at a restaurant scene. And he said he heard that sitar and his head exploded. So he's already starting his investigation into the transcendental India segment of his life. And Ringo is discovered in A Hard Day's Night as a great actor. And he's getting offers, and now he's the lead in Help. And John is like, what are we doing here? I feel like I'm an extra in my own movie. And yet Ringo's getting all these film offers. The boys, Paul just wanted to remain on tour. John wanted to stay in the studio. Their music was getting more complicated, and they were layering it with more electronic, experimental stuff. So they were each going already in their own direction, and it was inevitable. I watched an interview with George last night where he said we had a lot of problems before Yoko even entered the picture. So a lot of people blame Yoko. It wasn't Yoko's fault. It was just inevitable. They were so young when they started out together, and
What do
they
you
grew
think?
up.
Here's an interesting question I just thought of.
Okay.
What do you think in American society, maybe even globally, but definitely here in America, because of the celebration of celebrity and Hollywood and music and film and television and stars of all kinds, what do you think was a bigger shock to people? The divorce of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, or the breakup of the Beatles?
Ooh. Well, I was a little girl when Lucy and Desi announced their breakup. I must have been 6 or 7 because I was old enough to read, and I was, it was a huge, huge story in the newspaper. And actually, when I told my parents I wanted to be an actress, my mother said, there are no happy marriages in Hollywood. Look what happened to Lucy and Desi. So, yeah, it was a really big deal for that generation. But for the next generation, for the boomers, the breakup of the Beatles was devastating. It was so depressing, and because we had followed them as a group for so long, and they led the way for us. And suddenly that wasn't there anymore. And it was so much fun. It was so much fun. And it was so sad that it was an acrimonious breakup, and they didn't speak for some time and didn't see each other.
Paul McCartney created Wings, right? He had Wings and that group in the 70s.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And George's triple album, All Things Must Pass, because he had been so suppressed.
And then there's the Sergeant Pepper's movie too. That was a whole other thing. Yeah. Did you look into that as well too?
To the
Sergeant Pepper, the whole movie, that whole movie that came out.
do you mean the Magical Mystery Tour? Or
Yeah.
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 Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
That funky movie.
Yes.
That
Yes.
was something. It was on somewhere on one of the nostalgic channels a couple of nights ago or something, and we were watching it again. And it's funny how you can watch it at different times in your life, and it's different, just like with anything in life, right? Um,
Yes.
what
Yeah.
are some things you learned that surprised you in doing your digging in and your research for this book?
Well, as I did say, I was surprised that I could see how they would break up. I was surprised about John's affairs with older women. I was very surprised about the very dark side of Brian Epstein, their manager. He was so sophisticated and erudite, and people in the music industry loved him because he wasn't part of the music industry. He wasn't jaded. He treated his artists with respect. Um,
That's him on the bottom left, right?
yes, he was
Yeah.
such a handsome man. Um, but he was a gay man. And that was very difficult. I mean, it was illegal at that time in England to be a homosexual. He could have gone to jail
Mm-hmm.
had he led a life outside of the closet. The Beatles certainly knew he was gay, and again, they didn't have any exposure to that type of lifestyle, but they really loved Brian, and it did not affect their feelings toward him. But he, it was a pill popping time. I was a little surprised at how many pills the Beatles were popping, and I was a little surprised at the number of girls that made their way into the hotel room and didn't come out till night. I was
Was
then thinking,
yeah,
these guys are so cute, and
right.
they were,
Clean cut and right, because
they would never.
their look changed over the years. They came when they were clean cut and the whole right.
Yes, and they never, made advances on their fans. First of all, their fans were too young. They never did really anything that would have endangered their career or put them in a bad situation where a girl could cry rape. Every girl that made it into the suite was thoroughly
Vetted.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. But Brian, especially when they were touring Europe, he picked up a lot of men who were very rough. He would show up for work with a black eye, or he was robbed. He took a lot of pills, uppers and downers. He had his suits made, and he had little pockets hidden inside his suit to keep his pills in. And there was always that question. He died when he was 32 years old of a combination of liquor and pills. And the Beatles didn't want to tour anymore, and he didn't really know what lay next for him. All he knew how to do was book them on tour. So he was nervous about what was to come, and people thought he committed suicide. But I talked to several other artists that he represented, and they were adamant that it was not suicide. He had a very important meeting the next day. He wanted to get a good night's rest. He'd been out drinking. He took an extra pill so he would fall asleep and he'd be rested for the meeting. And they said it was just a complete accident and a real tragedy, a big tragedy for the Beatles as well.
Did what you learned, what you uncovered, the people you spoke to, this intensive research, and again, all these, you came at it from just about every angle you could to get the full, well-rounded story. You didn't just talk to celebrities or super fans. I mean, you really got a full scope, and it's a rich read for super fans or anybody who loves these kinds of stories, maybe even people who were there at Shea Stadium in New York at that time, would love to sort of relive some of it, but you're taking them behind the veil, behind the scenes. Was there anything in what you've learned that either gave you a deeper appreciation for the Beatles and what they had to do and what they had to create and constantly come out with, songs that had to resonate with people and be hits and what have you? The music industry, the pressures of it, touring, they're so young, and now all of a sudden the whole world is tugging at them. Did you find there was a deeper appreciation for them, or were you disappointed by some things you learned? How were you left with it all when you put the last period on the last sentence?
Oh, well, I did speak to a lot of people, a lot of fans who were in the audience, and they talk about it like it was yesterday. And they say, when I say I was at Shea, which is all they need to say, I was at Shea for the Beatles, the room is silent and everyone turns to them. And they still had that enthusiasm. And, I loved the Beatles. They absolutely changed my life and influenced me on so many levels. But life goes on, and you go to college and you meet new people and you hear new music, and the Beatles aren't together, and you kind of forget that you used to run to the store the minute a new Beatle album or even a 45 hit the store. You ran and you talked to you, and 5 people would gather around your hi-fi and listen and talk about it. And this was before marijuana ever entered into it. There was no marijuana smoke over Shea Stadium. It was just pure, unadulterated love. And by reliving it with all of these people, even Meryl Streep and the excitement she had, and she said, I had a better view of New Jersey than I had of the Beatles. And
of course, the planes flying over from LaGuardia too.
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
the World's Fair was next door, and she had her little Paul, I love you sign. And,
yes,
and so through all of that, when I put the last period on the last sentence, I realized that I had found my Beatlemania again, that pure love for everything they gave me, everything they brought to me. And I never want to lose that. It's idealistic and optimistic. And, I had lost touch with it. And I'm so glad it was reborn in me by doing the book.
I would imagine when you write books like these, not only are they fascinating and they're page turners, and it's history of the making and history being cherished, you're almost reliving elements of your own life. It's taking you back. Sometimes we think about how we feel when we're reading a book or watching a movie, whatever it is. But the creator, in this case, the author, has a reason for why they're doing it. And you're living it and reliving it as you're writing it too, right? So you're not just doing it to tell the facts and here's the story and here's some, things you never knew. You're immersed and going back in time yourself, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You couldn't have, I mean, if you're not emotionally involved with your subject, then, you're going to miss, you're going to miss a lot. This isn't Dragnet. It's not just the facts, ma'am. You have to bring the emotion to it. And certainly the people that I interviewed helped me with that. And so many wonderful stories that were actually, the Beatles were so innocent at that time. And here's one story that I just love. After the Shea Stadium concert, there was this girl dance group that was one of the opening acts. And they always booked a girl act so that the Beatles didn't have to shop out of town if they didn't want to. And the girls were going on tour with them. And Ringo and Paul went down to their room after Shea, and they were barefoot and they were jumping on the girls' beds, and they asked if they could borrow a hair dryer. Oh yeah, right. Both girls knew why they were there, and both girls threw them out. So one other woman that was on tour with them, she was 17, Brenda Holloway, a Motown singer, and she said that during the tour, she had a knock on the door and she thought, who's coming to see me? Everybody's here to see the Beatles. Nobody's knocking on my door. She opens it. It's Ringo. And he asked if he could borrow her hair dryer.
That's like a secret code.
That's right. And so she's so young that she gives him her hair dryer. And
it would have been a real giveaway.
And she gives him her hair dryer.
Timing, so you'll get this. That they didn't say they wanted the blow dryer. That would have been the giveaway.
They didn't even have those, but it was the cap that you put on, and it had the long tube.
A whole big thing, right?
So she gives him her, and I wish I could have been a fly on the wall when he went back to the Beatles suite with Brenda's hair dryer and not with Brenda. They must have ribbed him, so I just, today they'd send one of their gophers down to a girl's room.
Sure.
And, but back then they went themselves, and they had that clever little, let's ask for her hair dryer. And I just thought that was adorable. So it's also filled with really sweet, it was a sweet, innocent time.
It was, yeah.
And as you said, they shattered every showbiz attendance record in the history of showbiz.
It's really extraordinary when you look back at it. People still, they reference it, they talk about it. They have such a real thirst for it. They can't get enough, even all these years later, which is another reason why your book is such a success and such a hit. People can't get enough. Super fans of music, fans of the Beatles, whoever, people, from the New York area, whatever it may be, they just can't get enough of anything the Beatles and that fabulous night. What you're doing too is you're also introducing this to younger generations who are maybe hearing about the Beatles, fascinated by them, and learning about this epic night in 1965 that was captured. It's reliving for those who might have been there or remember the time, and then fresh and new for those who love history and love music and like to dig into iconic figures. And I think it's pretty cool. And the book has been very critically acclaimed, right? And well received.
Yes, thank you. And, let me just say, I haven't said this concert changed everything. First of all, 56,000 rock and roll fans had never laid eyes on one another before. You know, it was small groups at parties around the stereo. You know, this was now a movement. And Wall Street took note of it and said, we're only selling pimple cream to these kids. We could be selling so much more to them. And technology woke up the next morning and said, we failed. Nobody could hear them. Nobody could see them. And this is the future. And only 4 years later was Woodstock. Imagine pulling that off, you know, where everybody could see and hear them. So technology had to get on the ball. So really, that's why this concert is so memorable, because it brought about change on a massive scale.
Incredible. Who is the book for? I mentioned, you know, all generations can appreciate it, but did you have a reader in mind? Was it in your mind for just the Beatle fan, or was there nobody in mind?
Well, there's certainly a lot more information in the book than the Beatles and this concert. You know, somebody asked me, how can you write a whole book on one concert? Well, you know, it's the year leading up to it, or the 8 months leading up to it, and a few months afterward, because you keep showing the movie that they made that night of the Beatles at Shea, and I go through the production of that. And when they played Shea a year later, by then, John had already been quoted as saying the Beatles are more popular than Jesus now. And that turned a lot of people off. And the stadium was only half filled the second time they played. And George said, we played Shea Stadium twice. So the second time was not memorable. So really, anybody, I knew Beatle fans would love it. And I hope that young people who ask, what was it all about, will really get it when they read this book.
You know, music and Shea Stadium, as much as baseball, have been very intertwined. Billy Joel closed out Shea Stadium. That big concert that Billy Joel had was like the final time for people at Shea Stadium before they opened up Citi Field right next door. And then Shea Stadium, this beloved place, was to be torn down and erased from memory. I wish they still kept it. Matter of fact, when we go to Citi Field, I still say Shea, and I have to correct myself. We still say Shea Stadium. We're going to Shea Stadium. We don't say Citi Field, even though that's what it is. But it's just interesting, the amount of history within that stadium. Did you deduce why they picked Shea Stadium as a venue versus maybe Yankee Stadium or anything else? Was there something specific? Maybe it's a business arrangement or something specific about Shea that attracted them to do it there?
Yeah, well, of course, Sid Bernstein made all these decisions, and Shea Stadium in '65 was brand spanking new, and Yankee Stadium was old and showing signs of wear and tear. And Sid had already brought the Beatles to America. Sid was the first person to bring the Beatles to America. He brought them to Carnegie Hall, another venue that had never had a rock and roll band play there. They only booked the Beatles because they didn't know who they were and didn't know they played rock and roll. But when Ed Sullivan found out Sid was bringing them over, he said, hey, could they be on my show that same weekend? And so everyone thinks it was Ed, but it was Sid who discovered the Beatles and who brought them to America. So he already knew Brian Epstein, and he knew, as particular as Brian was, that he would not like Yankee Stadium and he would prefer the gorgeous new Shea. So that's why Sid picked Shea.
The World's Fair, like you said, was next door, and it was just a lot of excitement in that area. And Robert Moses, of course, did a lot of developing, and he created a lot of that, that was going on at that time in New York, building the bridges, building the parkways on Long Island, the World's Fairgrounds. Robert Moses, really amazing. And cool shot we've got of Sid.
There you go.
It's the person we're referring to, talent manager and so much more. It's a later picture, of course, of him.
He lived to be 95.
Did he? He made
Yeah.
it to 95.
He did.
Was he a revered, beloved figure, would you say?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. And years after Shea, Sid was out with John Lennon, and they were reminiscing about Shea. And John said to him, on that unforgettable night, Sid, we saw the top of the mountain. And that's why I named the book that.
So perfect. It's so full circle, Laurie. It really, really is. How do you know in your writing process for any of your books when you're finished? How do you know when there's enough in there where you are happy, you're complete, and you're content? Of course, you may rewrite things of that nature, but when do you know you got that last period on the last sentence? I'm good. I can release my baby, because it is like a baby.
Yeah.
It's like a child. It's like a child. I can release it to the world, share it with the world. When do you know when that is for you?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure I have a great answer. I got to the end, and I had certainly been over it and over it. And what I was worried about was when I had to turn it into the publisher. I had written it. I had already designed the style with the special boxes and the timeline running along the side, and and so many photos in the timeline, so many photos of the Beatles and what was going on. And the layout was really particular, and I was worried that they wouldn't go for the style, the actual physical style of the book. And I hate being edited, but they didn't really change anything. So I was thrilled.
That's the first. I love the way you said that too. It's the first time I've ever heard actually anybody say it in that tone and wiggle in their seat as they're saying it. I hate being edited. Right, exactly. That is tough when you hand it off, right? And then other eyes, right? Yeah, it's a tough, you just have to go with it, right? And what was harder for you, beginning, middle, or end? Starting it, finishing it, or tying it together? I actually had an author on here who said, it was the first time I heard them say that. They said the middle for them was the hardest part. They knew how they wanted to start it. They had an idea of how they wanted to end it. It was the linking of the two with the middle that was the hardest part for them.
Well, this story, pretty much told itself. Certainly the beginning was all Sid's story. The terrible financial position he was in, and the depression he was in that really birthed this idea. So the beginning was all Sid. And then I guess, the middle part of following the Beatles' path and paralleling that to Sid's path of all the hurdles Sid had to clear to make it happen, and the experiences the Beatles were having on their way to Shea, which were changing them. They're making movies. They Bob Dylan gets them stoned, all kinds of things that are, they at one point,
Welcome to America.
at one point, George and John went to a dinner party in London. Some guy that was on the fringe of the group they hung out with, and he dosed them unknowingly with LSD.
Ooh.
Now this is, in February, and Shea was in August. So, they have this frightening but very remarkable experience. And George said he said that after that experience, John was his best friend for the rest of his life. And I'm thinking, not John and Paul, but John and George. And then John and George said we couldn't even relate to Ringo and Paul until they also dropped acid. And Ringo was up for it, but Paul had to be convinced months later, and already then I see the separation between those three and Paul. That these three wanted to go with manager Alan Klein, and Paul wanted to go with Linda Eastman's father. And, so already the lines in the sand were being drawn. So there was a huge amount of information, Jim, that I was dealing with. So it was linking all of that to the big story.
Wow.
But it was so exciting. It was really so exciting to do.
I can only imagine. Here again is the book. Fabulous cover, fabulous stories, really amazing. We're talking to the author of this book and many, many, many more. She is amazing, and you're going to love this, folks. Top of the Mountain, the Beatles at Shea Stadium, 1965. Hundreds of photos and interviews, recollections from so many people. You're going to feel like you were there for the first time, or you're going to relive those feelings you had when you were there. Laurie, congratulations on that book, one of many in your repertoire. We're going to have you back to talk about several others that are completely different from this book, focused on the 1965 Beatles concert. This was really fantastic. Congratulations on it. I know, again, it's critically acclaimed and fans love it, and I encourage folks to get it. They can go to Amazon and wherever books are sold to get it, right, my friend?
Correct. Or they can write me at my website, lauriejacobson.com. If they want a signed copy, they can write me personally, and I'll mail it out.
And there's the spelling of her name right on the screen there, Laurie Jacobson. Just add the .com, and her fabulous website is there. And you can see also the other books that she has penned. This was amazing, Laurie, really a true treat. And as I mentioned in the introduction, you are married to Timmy from Lassie, which is kind of exciting for all the TV fans out there, I know. And he'll be joining us in a week or so. We look forward to that. He's a great guy as well. And thanks for all of the time. Kathleen, now talk about sort of full circle here. Kathleen is in New York City, and she works at Citi Field where the Mets play. She works with the Mets. Yeah. And she went to Shea and knows Shea very well and is very affiliated with all of that as well. So she's excited. The book sounds awesome. Good luck with it. And she's going to pick it up as well. And everybody, I mean, what a fantastic story. That's great. And
thank you.
Andrea Anderson, Laurie, I can only imagine the amount of time it took to complete your research. Absolutely. Everybody's all excited about it, and I'm very happy. Pierre welcomes you to the party, the Jim Masters show. We say the show has a lot of light, love, and levity, and I said that in the beginning of the pandemic. And one time, and I mentioned this to new folks, one time I said it a little too fast, and I said the show has a lot of light levity, combining love and levity. So the audience then told me what the plan is. I said, what's the plan? They said, you're now Mr. Lovety. This is Lovety Hall. We're your Lovety squad, and the guests are part of the Lovety family.
Oh,
So,
I love
Laurie, you are Lovety Laurie now on the Jim
I
Masters Show.
love that. That's super.
Isn't that cool?
Sometimes the best things are born out of a little mistake.
Out of Freudian slips. Exactly. Congratulations on everything, my friend. And
Thank you,
come
Jim.
see us again real soon. And I will keep the porch light on for you. As I always say, you're welcome back anytime. Spread the word about our series, our Entertainment Lifestyle Celebrity Talk Show series. Again, like I mentioned, it's not really interviews. It's more good, free-flowing conversations. And with the interactivity of the viewers who've been commenting and welcoming you throughout and wishing you well. And I hope you enjoyed the time with me as much as I absolutely have with you.
Oh, absolutely. I loved it. Thank you so much.
The pleasure is all mine. And as I've said previously on this show, and I've said many years before, my father, who is from New York City originally, my Irish dad, when I was 7 years old, he said to me, Jimmy, I'm the fifth James, so Jimmy at that time, and I still have cousins that say Jimmy. Jimmy, always remember now, when somebody says something nice or kind to you, always make sure you thank them for that. Make time to thank them for those nice words. Then ask them to please put those words in writing and address it management.
The Irish are so much fun.
I tell you, right?
They are.
Oh, yeah. The Irish, Jewish, very, very funny, quick wit, dry observations of life. It's cool. I mean, some of the greatest, the Neil Simons and just the Norman Lears, you know. I love observational humor and dry, quick wit.
I do too.
And you come from the world of comedy, so you know. So I had mentioned, and I know we were, talking about this a little bit in the beginning, but for anybody just joining us, you again are a reformed stand-up comic. Tell the audience what a reformed stand-up comic is.
Well, I was doing improv, and many of the people in my workshop, like Robin Williams, they came from stand-up. So I thought, well, I'll, see what that's about. And I did do stand-up a couple of times. And, I was already pursuing acting without a tremendous amount of success, or rather, let me say, I was a great waitress. and I thought, and there were very few women doing stand-up at that time. And I thought, well, here's yet another arduous trail here to get to the top in stand-up. I thought I could sit in a lot of smoke-filled rooms till 2:00 in the morning, hoping for my 5 minutes on stage, or I could stop. So I had a few great stand-up engagements, and then I stopped.
You had a few stand-up engagements, and then you sat down.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it. You're the best, Laurie. Thanks again for spending all this time. You were very generous with it. And come see us again. And congratulations on the book. Again, we really encourage folks to go to Amazon and everywhere to pick it up. LaurieJacobson.com is the website. And you enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks so much for being with us here on the Jim Masters Show.
Thanks, Jim. Can't wait
Great
for
treat.
the next time.
Absolutely. You be well, okay?
You too.
All right. Take care.
You
Bye-bye
too,
now.
darling. Bye.
Incredible conversation, right? With Laurie Jacobson joining us here from Northern California by way originally of St. Louis. That's where she hails from. Great stories, huh? She is a prolific writer. an extraordinary author, and she's penned a lot of books. This is just one of them, but what a great one it is, Top of the Mountain. And the reason why we did it now live, because now if you're watching this 6 months from now, then it's a totally different scenario. But at the time of the show right now, it's in August, and it's just, a few days away from the actual anniversary of when that happened in August of 65. So we figured, of all the different books she's written, which one should we focus on now at around the time of the anniversary? And yeah, that's the reason why we did it now. And it's really fantastic. Top of the Mountain, The Beatles at Shea Stadium, 1965 by Laurie Jacobson. We appreciate Laurie being with us. We appreciate you being with us as well. Want to let you know, for those who are watching live, we have a music veteran joining us tomorrow. Eddie Taduri, legendary drummer, is going to be with us for an exclusive Jim Masters Show live conversation. He has great things to share, including his new autobiography. He also created the Rhythmic Arts Project, which is extraordinary. He's with us tomorrow. That's also going to be 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And if you didn't catch the iconic group of people we had, Hollywood veterans, celebrities, producers, household names who came to join us, like 12 guests we had last night as we celebrated iconic television game show veteran, host of the Hollywood Squares, actor, Broadway star, singer, and so much more, Peter Marshall. Check that episode out. It's getting a lot of views, and it was really incredible. We had so many extraordinary people joining us. Ruta Lee and Mark Summers from Double Dare and Nickelodeon, Glenn Scarpelli. I mean, it was just really amazing. Check that out as well. So we're going to wrap up, and I am starving. I haven't had a chance to eat yet, and I know the convention is on, so we're going to check that out as well at the time of the show. Again, if you're watching this 6 months from now, disregard that, because it'll be a whole new world. And we love having you with us. If this is your first time, thanks for joining us here on the Jim Masters Show. We welcome you, and we encourage you, if you enjoyed this episode and all the episodes you enjoy, do give us a like, a thumbs up like. Now, this episode is also archived on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. So come join us, join the family, like our episodes, leave a comment for us, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. And if you'd like to share this, you can share it from the YouTube link on your social media. Thanks to everybody who does that. We appreciate every single one of you. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us here. Another great show for all of you and you and you and you all around the world. We appreciate you being here. Andrea, thank you very much. Good interview, Jim. Thank you. I appreciate that. And everybody, Mona in Louisiana says, enjoyed tonight. Hope everyone has a great night. Thank you. Appreciate that as well. And all the great comments coming in our chat room. That's our chat room. But do leave a comment underneath too, because that lets us know you're enjoying what we're doing here at the Jim Masters Show Live. Thanks for being with us, everybody. Come see us again. We'll keep the porch light on for you as well. Love one another. Take care of one another. And don't forget to love yourself. Very important for all of us here at the Jim Masters Show. We appreciate you being with us. Spread the word about our series and come see us again. Take care. Cheers.